don't need a damn kid. Phil locks me heavily pregnant in the sounder room and leaves the house with a sickening smile on his face. As I watch his back disappearing, shaking with anger, an unexpected person comes to my rescue. I can never forgive him. I can't stand the thought of not being able to get back at him in any way. Overwhelmed with anger, I stood up, and with the help of a collaborator, vowed to take my revenge on him. I will definitely show him hell. I won't let this go. Thus I begin my plan to show him hell. My name is Courtney Hansen. I'm a 34-year-old housewife and currently 9 months pregnant. I have a husband, Phil. And our life was happy until we got married. I met Phil at a matchmaking event. I have a physically disabled mother and was working while taking care of her with little financial freedom. Considering my age, I wanted someone to help me, a support for my life. That's why I started looking for a marriage partner. About a year after I started attending the event, I met Phil. He was a surgeon with a high income, earning well over $100,000 a year. He had so many rivals vying for his attention due to his overflowing charm. Women surrounded him, leaving no opportunity for me to even speak to him. I thought to myself, there's no way I can fit into this picture with someone as popular as him. There's no way he would notice someone like me. Maybe I should just back off. Just as I was about to give up, to my surprise, Phil approached me and started a conversation. That bracelet's cute. I noticed you looking over here and couldn't help but say something. Was that okay? The bracelet was a graduation gift from my mother. It wasn't an expensive brand, just a sentimental item. But his compliment made me happy, and I responded to him with a bright expression. Phil looked at me kindly, and before we knew it, we were talking until the event ended. We continued our light-hearted conversation until the very end, never parting. Then he asked for my contact information. This became the catalyst for our relationship to develop further. Before we started dating, I shared with him about my mother and my reasons for starting to look for a marriage partner, seeking hope and support in life. He held my hand, sympathized with my struggles, and appreciated all the efforts I had made. If I can be of help, would you let me be your support? Moved by his kind gaze, I accepted his confession and started dating him. I was overjoyed that Phil accepted me with my circumstances and loved me wholeheartedly. A year into our relationship, he proposed. Of course, I had no reason to refuse. I couldn't think of any other option but to happily accept. I never imagined that everything up to that point was a sweet trap to ensnare me. Women should just stay at home. They can't earn much anyway. It's better if you do the chores. And I worked. Right after getting married, Phil made me quit my job. Perhaps due to his family's ancient lineage, his way of thinking was also outdated. Women should protect the home, men should earn outside. That's the custom and tradition he was raised with, so I was told. I was told to become a housewife and take care of the house. But wouldn't it be better for both of us if I also worked and we saved more money? What's that supposed to mean? Are you mocking me, saying that my income isn't enough and you're unsure about our future? Whenever I suggest working outside, Phil always gets upset like this. If I do housework, he berates me for not doing it properly, leading to days filled with verbal abuse. For me, who thought of married life as something happy, this reality is unbearably hard to accept. Why do you say that? I didn't mean it like that. Shut up, are you talking back to me? Whenever I tried to express my opinion, Phil would often shout at me as if in a tantrum and throw things. Though he never hit me directly, he always threw things close enough to hit me. And gradually, I became terrified. Even when he raised his voice, mentally worn down by fear and anxiety, I continued days where I couldn't stand up to him. I even tried to run away from home, but he had installed surveillance cameras inside the house, monitoring my every move from his workplace computer all day. Any unusual behavior was immediately noticed. Furthermore, as soon as he made me quit my job, my mother was admitted to a nursing home. Her physical condition and cognitive decline had progressed, and home care was difficult. When we decided to get married, there had already been talk of her moving into a facility. Don't worry about the cost. Let's find a facility where your mother can enjoy the rest of her life comfortably, he said. He chose a well-known luxurious nursing home in the area, and my mother started to live there. She seemed very satisfied with her life in that facility. If I ran away from him, I would take away my mother's seemingly happy life. If she lived with me, a jobless person, she might not be happy. Our standard of living would certainly drop, and she might suffer. All these thoughts circulated in my head, and I couldn't muster the courage to leave him. If I endure, if I can just withstand this life, perhaps my mother could be happy, at least until she reaches the end of her life, I thought. I have to endure with that thought. I continued to endure his emotional abuse. But then an incident happened that made me give up on this idea. I'm pregnant. I felt unwell and had not menstruated, so I visited an obstetrician-gynecologist. Then the doctor announced something unbelievable, and my world went dark. Yes, congratulations, you're currently in the 8th week. You can get your maternity booklet by the next visit, the doctor said. While the nurses watched over me warmly with smiles, my face lost all color, and my vision began to blur. It's strange because he said he was sterile. He thought he had aoospermia, I thought. During our marriage, Phil had made me promise several things. First, when I demand sex, never refuse. Managing a husband's health is also a wife's job. That includes sex. I'll do it when I feel like it, so never demand it from me, and just quietly comply with my requests. I felt like I was being told to become a machine, and I still remember the despair in this life I never wanted. To get pregnant with such a person, the born child would be unhappy, I thought. So I asked him if I could get a prescription for birth control pills. I understand, but I've always had regular periods and I've been feeling unwell lately. I was thinking of getting a prescription for the pill. Is that all right? I cautiously told him. But he immediately showed disgust and yelled at me. Irregular periods? That's just your imagination. Women's menstrual pain is like a kind of faint illness. It's all in your head. First of all, how will you pay for the clinic? You're not thinking of using the household money, are you? That's a joke. To use my income for such a faint illness. You're such a beggar. If you want to visit the clinic, use your own money. Well, that is, if you have any savings, he said. I shed tears at his words, which made me doubt if he really was a doctor. He always said that he had no obligation to pay for my medical expenses. He called me a malingerer when I was immobilized by menstrual pain. Because of this, my savings rapidly decreased, and soon I couldn't even afford to visit the clinic. This means I could get pregnant. I must find a way not to have a child. I thought anxiously. As I spent my days anxiously, I overheard a conversation while Phil was drinking with his friends at home. Phil, aren't you going to have kids? Your wife is over 30. Isn't she going to start asking for one soon? One of his friends asked. Ah, that's fine. I have azoospermia. I was thinking of adopting a child for inheritance, Phil laughed. Hearing him laugh about this, I felt a deep sense of relief. Now I don't have to worry about having children. All I have to do is endure my mother's situation, and someday I will be free, I thought. But why has it come to this? My plans had gone awry. In a panic, I called Phil. When I told him about the pregnancy, he responded indifferently. You're pregnant, Well, it's fine. One more kid won't make it impossible to get by on my income. But I have no intention of taking care of the kid, so you do it. If it bothered me in any way, I will kick both of you out. That's absurd. And you? You said you had aospermia, I exclaimed. That. I just said that because I never used contraception and never got anyone pregnant before. I never actually had a test or anything. It was just my guess. But what's the problem? Is it bad that you're pregnant? You're a housewife. And we have enough for a comfortable life, so there shouldn't be any problem. Right? Phil said. Phil became suspicious due to my slip of the tongue. In a rush to cover it up, I told him I was just shocked that we conceived earlier than expected. Though he was suspicious, he didn't press me further. I regret not having seen a certificate from the hospital at that time. If only I had verified it with my own eyes. It's my oversight. All of this is because of my own naivety. Then Phil gave me an outrageous order. If it's a girl, I don't want her. A girl might end up being married off, and I refuse to let my inheritance go to some other man. What's needed for an heir is a boy. Make sure you give birth to a boy. If it's a girl, abort it. Got it? I was speechless at his view of a child as nothing but a tool. If the child is a girl, she might not have to endure a life of suffering, she might be spared the hell that I've seen. Maybe it's better for the child not to be born than to come into a world of unhappiness. If I abort this child, maybe my anxiety will disappear. Such thoughts crossed my mind, and tears began to flow endlessly from my eyes. I cried openly on the way back from the obstetrician. I sat on the sidewalk sobbing, repeatedly apologizing while stroking my belly. People stared at me while walking by, but no one tried to speak to me. That was a relief. I just wanted to cry without caring about anyone else. I'm sorry, so sorry. I'm the worst mother for even thinking about your life like that. I apologized to the tiny life still in the egg state, crying until I felt like my tears would dry up. After a while, I calmed down and reconsidered what I really wanted for myself and my child. Whether the child is a boy or a girl, I want to give birth to this child. I want to protect my child no matter what. There's no fault in the life I've been given, and I've always loved children. If it weren't for this situation, I would definitely want to have this child. Plus, my mother might be happy. I've never done anything truly filial for her. Even when I was caring for her, she often apologized more than thanked me. I'm sorry, Courtney. I'm such a burden. I'm so sorry for being such a pitiful mother. Every time I heard her words, my heart ached. But it's different with a grandchild. It's not something that directly affects her. My mother, who loves children, might be happy to see her grandchild. Now I found reasons to want to give birth, realizing my own feelings. I promise I'll protect you, no matter what. I decided to give birth to the child in my belly and attempted to persuade Phil. But Phil's opinion was hard to change. If it's a boy, have it. If it's a girl, abort it. This unchanging mindset persisted as I reached the 15th week of pregnancy. As usual, Phil was adamant in his decision. So I decided to announce my pregnancy during the New Year's greetings at Phil's parents' house, as a strategy to gain his parents as allies. You're pregnant, that's wonderful news. Phil had planned to tell his parents after the baby's gender was determined and the decision to give birth was final. So he had told me to keep quiet about it to his parents. However, I broke that instruction, spoiling Phil's plans. He forced a strained smile and gave a half-hearted response. Thank you, Dad. Well, she's not in a stable period, so we don't know what will happen. If the baby turned out to be a girl, I'd have to abort her. I wanted to prevent that at all costs. Sensing his transparent true intentions in his words, I immediately interrupted, continuing the conversation. But as a housewife, I have plenty of time to rest, so if all goes well, I think I can safely give birth. I might ask for help from you too when the time comes. Please support me. Honestly, I was trembling inside. I knew I would be scolded harshly when I got back. But even though I knew that, gaining my in-laws as allies might help me safely deliver the baby and protect this child, and if they didn't react negatively here, maybe I could ask for their help if something happened in the future, it was a huge gamble. While relieved by my father-in-law's positive reaction, I turned my gaze to my mother-in-law, the problematic one. Take care of yourself. My mother-in-law Mary was a strict and dignified woman. She always paid attention to her appearance, giving off the impression of a wealthy lady with her strict yet refined demeanor. Her response wasn't exactly positive, and considering the strict family background I knew about, I feared she wouldn't look favorably upon me. Until the baby's gender is known, I involuntarily bowed my head. Regardless of the baby's gender, let me know as soon as you find out. I want to go shopping for baby clothes together. As I was about to feel disheartened, these unexpected words reached me, and I looked up in surprise. Tears nearly escaped my eyes as I saw Mary's face. Instead of her usual stern expression, she looked at me warmly, like a true mother, clearly really happy about my pregnancy. Mary is not good at expressing her joy. She is really happy, even if it doesn't seem like it. My father-in-law Bob discreetly shared her feelings. Mary, hearing this, playfully scolded him, saying, "Oh, stop it." But their affectionate interaction filled me with warmth. I repeatedly bowed my head, thanking them, genuinely happy, for the first time, about my pregnancy. I received their phone numbers with Mary, saying I should contact her any time if something came up, as she usually stayed home and had time to help. Until now, communication was through Phil. But since you're pregnant and shopping might be difficult, feel free to contact me anytime. I'm usually at home and can always help with such things. She offered me a coat, and seeing her kindness, I wondered if this could really be the same person who taught Phil that women should guard the home. I wanted to ask more, but Phil was closely monitoring the situation, so I couldn't get a chance. We left the in-laws' house that day as expected. I received a thorough scolding from Phil when we got home. The moment the front door closed, he threw his shoes at me and lectured me for an hour while I sat on the floor in the living room. If I moved slightly due to numbness in my legs, he shouted even more, continuing until I couldn't stand properly, due to the loss of sensation. Getting the in-laws on my side must have affected Phil greatly. He changed his mind, saying that regardless of gender, I should give birth to the child. The moment I heard that, I mentally celebrated. From then on, I tried to take it easy, getting help from my in-laws and continuing my life. Their increased visits also meant restriction of action for Phil. Then, as I approached full-term pregnancy, if all went well, I was due to give birth in 2 weeks. I looked forward to meeting the baby, feeling excited about the approaching day. "Courtney, can you come here for a moment?" Against Phil's wishes, it turned out the baby was a girl. Still, he didn't insist on an abortion, so I thought everything would be okay. Then, I was summoned by Phil in front of the home SAA set up in our yard. Wondering what it was about, I went there to find him asking me to check for some insect-like thing inside. "I really can't handle bugs. Please take care of it for me," he begged desperately, sounding pathetic. Whenever there was a bug in the house, he would call me instead of dealing with it himself. Coming from a rural background, it was no big deal for me, so I entered the SAA room, feeling somewhat exasperated. "Where did you see it?" I asked. "In the corner of the room," he replied. As I searched for the bug and moved further into the room, suddenly, I heard the door slam shut. I quickly turned towards the entrance, only to see Phil's smirking face through the small window and heard the sound of the lock. "Hey, what are you doing? Open the door," I shouted. "Shut up, don't order me around," Phil retorted, intimidating me. "If you hadn't blabbed to my parents, I wouldn't have had to do this. You brought this on yourself. Reflect on your actions while you're in there for the next 3 days," he added. "What are you planning to do? Where are you going?" I yelled with all my might at Phil, who was about to leave with the key still in the lock. He stopped, turned towards me, and smirked maliciously. "I don't need a damn kid. Since you ignored my feelings, you need some harsh punishment. I'm going to be away for 3 days. Reflect properly while you're locked in there," he said terrifyingly. I realized the horror of his plan, to stay here for 3 days without food or water, and with a child in my belly. He probably hopes the child won't be born. I was speechless and despairing at Phil's unthinkable idea. Seeing my expression, he seemed to enjoy it mockingly, abandoning me and walking away. After a while, I heard the sound of Phil's car engine. He must have left the house. What should I do? My phone was inside the house, and even if I shouted, my voice wouldn't reach anyone in the neighboring houses. If only I could break the small window. Desperately looking around, I found a bucket of salt used for the SAA. If I break the window with this? I lifted the bucket and threw it with all my might at the small window. As expected, the window shattered easily, letting the outside noise into the room. However, the problem was the lack of any human presence. It was 9 p.m., and in this area with many elderly residents, everything was silent at this hour. "Is anyone there? Please, someone help me, anyone!" I shouted desperately for help, but no one seemed to come. If it remained like this until morning, I would surely freeze. The outside temperature was near freezing in the dead of winter, and I was only in my loungewear, making it a true hellish situation. "Where are you?" I heard a familiar voice from outside and peered out of the small window. "Are you sure you heard Courtney's voice? Phil's car isn't here. Maybe they went out together," someone speculated. "No, I'm sure it was Courtney's voice. Something must have happened. Courtney, it's me. Where are you? Please answer me." Fortunately, my in-laws happened to visit our house that night to share some dinner leftovers. Using all the strength I had left, I raised my voice, barely audible, to shout to my in-laws that I was there, hearing my voice. They immediately came to the SAA room, seeing me locked inside. The color drained from their faces, and they hurriedly unlocked the SAA room's door. Luckily, our home SAA had a numerical lock, so I was able to tell my in-laws the code, and they successfully unlocked it. Upon stepping outside, Mary quickly wrapped me in her coat and took me to their house. As all the doors of our home were locked, they welcomed me into their home. Since I couldn't return to mine, they provided me with warm clothes and drinks. A servant immediately heated up the bath, allowing me to warm my chilled body and avoid any harm. Once I had calmed down, my in-laws approached me with concern and asked what had happened. I told them everything about the terrible treatment I had received from Phil and what had occurred that day, sparing no details. Hearing my story, Bob was speechless. Mary trembled with anger and, coming to my side, hugged me tight. "Lately, why didn't you rely on us sooner? How much you must have suffered. I'm so sorry. We should have noticed something was wrong with you too," Mary said, tears flowing from her eyes as I felt her loving, motherly anger and warmth. Bob looked at me with concern, biting his lip and bowing his head in apology. "I can't forgive what our son has done. Where is he now? Do you know where he went?" Mary's anger was evident, and she ordered her maid to immediately bring Phil back in front of me. The normally reserved servants were flustered by her stern tone and hardly said a word about their task, but I quickly stopped them in panic. "Wait, please. Phil is probably with his mistress right now," I said. "What did you say?" My shocking revelation made Mary's voice crack in surprise. Bob was also stunned, turning pale and looking at me in disbelief. I had discovered Phil's affair about a month ago. He would talk on the phone with a woman every night, and their disgustingly sweet conversations could be heard even from the next room. I had recorded these conversations for when we would divorce, and kept notes of the days he went out. I had confirmed the identity of his mistress through his phone and social media, and I saw that he had written about going out with her that day earlier. When I had calmed down, I checked and found that he was on a 3-day trip with his mistress. I cursed myself for marrying such a terrible man, I confessed. My in-laws knelt before me, apologizing while crying. "We are truly sorry. You might not forgive us, but as his parents, we feel terribly sorry. We think we spoiled him too much. We are truly sorry." They apologized with tears. I urged them to raise their faces. "It's not your fault, but Mary, I can't let this go. I thought about calling the police, but that alone won't quell my anger," I said. Agreeing with me, we devised a plan to teach Phil a lesson. 3 days later, unaware of everything, Phil returned home. He came rushing into the garden with excitement. "Hey, how's it going in there? Did you learn your lesson?" he asked, thinking I was still in the SA. However, he was shocked to see the small window of the SA room broken, and the light inside turned off. He panicked, wondering how the light was turned off and why the window was broken. Rushing to check inside, he entered the sauna room, but the moment he did, the door shut and locked. What startled by the noise, Phil turned around to see me peering through the broken small window, greeting him with a beaming smile. "Welcome back, dear. Did you enjoy your little affair trip, Phil?" I taunted. "How did you escape from here?" "No, forget that. Unlock the door, let me out," Phil demanded. "You seem pretty confident. Did you take a good look inside the room?" I asked, and the moment I did, Phil seemed to notice something amiss inside the dark room. He strained his ears and looked around. "What's that noise?" Hearing a familiar rustling sound, Phil felt an eerie sense of dread. I couldn't help but smirk at his frightened face. "Well, who knows if you're unsure of what it is? Why don't I show you? Make friends with it." I covered the small window with an acrylic panel. On my cue, my mother-in-law turned on the light inside the room. My father-in-law quickly secured the acrylic panel with an electric screwdriver. As the light illuminated the room, Phil let out a scream that echoed in the garden and collapsed. Ah, spiders, spiders. The room was filled with numerous cellar spiders. Phil had a profound fear of insects, especially spiders. Just hearing the sound of their 6 legs moving made his skin crawl and filled him with horror. No, don't come near me, Courtney. What are you doing? Open the door, let me out, don't come near me." Crying out pathetically, Phil begged for help. I looked down at him through the small window, grinning sarcastically. "Cellar spiders are great for eating those shiny black ones you hate, you know. They won't bite humans, so it's fine. Hope you guys get along. Don't be ridiculous, there's no way those shiny black ones are in here. Just open the door." "Ah, it's coming this way. Please stop, don't come near me." Desperately resisting, Phil was frantically banging on the door and thrashing his legs. Surely, in this state, he would confess everything just to get out of the room. I interrogated him while looking down, asking about the events of the past 3 days and his mistress. "If you answer my questions honestly, I might let you out." What? "I'll answer anything, just let me out." Even with the acrylic panel blocking the window, The noise was unbearable. If I had been outside, my eardrums might have burst. I questioned him thoroughly and made Phil spill everything directly. Due to his desperation to leave the room, he blurted out everything without thinking. Why he was being asked these questions, he also talked about his mistress. "That's everything, I'm not hiding anything else," Phil said. Was that enough to file a divorce? At my words, Phil turned his gaze in surprise. "Why are Mom and Dad here? We rescued Courtney the day you locked her up." "That can't be. You've strayed too far from being a decent person. Someone like you is not needed in our family. We will take care of Courtney. We won't let you do as you please with her anymore." Phil finally seemed to understand that all his deeds were exposed. Already mentally cornered by the presence of spiders, this additional mental blow must have pushed him to the brink of despair. The color drained from his face, and he was completely lost for words. Thus, I succeeded in my revenge against Phil, with the help of my in-laws. Despite his pleas to let him out, Phil spent the day in the sauna. The next morning, my father-in-law found Phil unconscious and foaming at the mouth. I was taken in by my in-laws, and all my belongings were retrieved. Mary, the maid, aware of the situation, protected me from Phil. I successfully divorced him without any further contact, thanks to my in-laws. I found a new job and a place to live, and my mother was taken into a different facility by my father-in-law. Afterward, Phil was disowned by his family. Rumors about the whole incident spread among the neighbors, affecting the management of his hospital. Reportedly, the hospital fell into a dire state. He was despised by the nursing staff, many of whom didn't want to work under such a disreputable person, leading to a wave of resignations. Soon after, I safely gave birth to my first child. 3 years after giving birth to my daughter, I now work at my mother's care facility, while raising my child. My in-laws often visit and cherish their grandchild, allowing me to regain happy days.